Ever feel like your brain's just got like a million tabs open all at once? You
Mhm.
know, you're trying to focus, but distractions are coming at you from every direction.
Oh, absolutely. It's the story of our lives these days, isn't it? Especially with everything demanding our attention constantly.
It really is. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're going to be exploring this book, Hyperfocus by Chris Bailey.
Great choice. I think it's so relevant, especially for anyone who's, trying to get things done in this crazy world.
Right. And I think it's particularly useful for, well, our listeners here.
Hmm.
We've got working professionals, people prepping for those tough exams, and of course, life coaches too.
I mean, focus is kind of essential for all of them, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so the book kicks off with this really interesting scene. It's set in a diner, and Bailey's painting this picture of, well, everyone's focusing on something, but it's all over the place. People on their phones, lost in conversations. Some are focused on the music, others just kind of staring off into space.
It's like that snapshot of how our attention is always being pulled in different directions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it really made me stop and think about my own day. Like, how much time do I actually spend focused on what truly matters? Versus all that other stuff that just kind of grabs my attention.
And that's really the core message Bailey's getting at, right? It's this difference between being on autopilot, where we just react to whatever's in front of us.
Like those email notifications that pop up and you just have to check them right away.
Exactly. That's the perfect example. And then there's that intentional focus, where you actually decide, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to shut out everything else.
So it's about being in control, right? Choosing where you direct that mental energy.
Yes. And choosing wisely. Because let's face it, we've only got so much attention to go around.
So true. Now, Bailey actually breaks down our work tasks into these 4 categories. There's the necessary and purposeful work, which are both productive. But then there's also the unnecessary and distracting work, which, well, isn't so productive.
And I think that's where it gets really interesting for our listeners, right? Because depending on what you do, those categories can look pretty different.
Okay, so let's get specific. Can you give us some examples maybe tailored to our audience here, like for working professionals, competitive exam folks, and life coaches?
Sure. So imagine you're a working professional, a strategic planning session for a big project that's definitely necessary and purposeful.
Got it. Makes sense.
But then think about answering those emails that aren't actually urgent. Necessary, maybe, but they can really sidetrack you.
Oh, tell me about it. My inbox is a black hole sometimes.
And then there's attending conferences. Could be purposeful if it aligns with your goals, but is it really necessary?
Good point. Sometimes it feels like you have to go, but maybe not always.
Exactly. And finally, let's be honest, we all do it. Scrolling through social media during work hours, that's the classic unnecessary and distracting combo.
Ouch, that one. It's close to home for sure. I think we're all guilty of that from time to time.
Absolutely, but the key is to recognize it, right? Become aware of those patterns and then start shifting towards those more intentional choices.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about being more mindful.
Exactly. And I'm curious, for our listeners out there, what are your biggest distractions? What are those tasks that might fall into those unnecessary or distracting categories for you?
Yeah, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Because even just becoming aware of these things, that's a huge first step, right?
It really is, because then you can start to take back control.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Being the driver of your attention, not the passenger.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us perfectly into the heart of the book, hyperfocus.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What exactly does hyperfocus mean? What does it look like in practice?
Think of it like stepping into this mental soundproof booth. Everything else fades away, and you're completely immersed in whatever you're doing. It's about giving that one task your complete, undivided attention.
That sounds incredible, but also kind of intimidating. Can anyone actually achieve that level of focus?
Well, Bailey actually shares this amazing story in the book. He talks about how he managed to write, get this, over 2,000 words in just 2 hours during one of his hyperfocus sessions.
Wow. Okay, now imagine applying that to, say, studying for a big exam, or even prepping for an important coaching session with a client.
Exactly. Think about how much you could accomplish if you could tap into that level of focus. You'd be absorbing information like a sponge.
That's a game changer. So hyperfocus is about maximizing our output, but also about really understanding the information we're taking in, right?
Absolutely. It's about depth over distraction. And for our listeners, whether you're a working professional, an exam prepper, or a life coach, being able to really focus deeply on the task at hand, That's a skill that can take you so far.
No doubt about it. But I think the big question for a lot of us is, how do we actually get there? How do we tame all those distractions that are constantly vying for our attention?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Bailey actually reveals this pretty shocking statistic. Studies show that on average, we can only work for about 40 seconds in front of a computer before getting distracted.
Wait, 40 seconds? Seriously? No wonder I feel like I can never get anything done.
Right. It's like our brains are wired for distraction. But the good news is we can fight back. Bailey breaks down these distractions into 4 main types.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
So first, we've got the external and uncontrollable distractions. Think about those sudden, loud noises, things you really can't do anything about.
Like that construction going on outside that always seems to start right when I'm about to have an important call.
Exactly. Then there are the external BUT controllable distractions. These are the ones we actually have some power over, like those pesky phone notifications or a messy, cluttered workspace.
And I imagine those are especially challenging for people who work from home or in those busy open plan offices.
Oh, absolutely. It's about creating boundaries and taking control of your environment as much as possible.
Makes sense. So what about those distractions that come from within?
Ah, yes. The internal distractions. We got the uncontrollable ones, like when a sudden worry pops into your head or you get hit with a wave of anxiety. And then there are the internal controllable distractions, things like daydreaming or letting your mind wander off on tangents.
So basically, distractions are coming at us from both inside and outside. It's a constant battle.
It really is. But Bailey doesn't just leave us hanging. He gives us some really practical tactics for managing each of these types of distractions.
Okay, so let's talk solutions. What does he suggest?
Well, for those external controllable distractions, it's about taking charge, right? Using website blockers, silencing those notifications, and creating a dedicated workspace that's free of clutter.
And I think that's especially important for our listeners who are in those high-pressure situations, like prepping for exams or working with clients. You need to create an environment that's conducive to focus.
Absolutely. Now, for those internal distractions, things like mindfulness meditation, journaling, or even just making a good old-fashioned to-do list can help a lot. It's about clearing out that mental clutter.
And sometimes even just taking a break, stepping away from the task for a few minutes, can do wonders, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes a change of scenery is all you need to reset your focus.
This is all great advice, but I think it's especially valuable for life coaches, right? Helping your clients identify their own unique distraction patterns and develop those personalized strategies.
Absolutely. And that's what coaching is all about, right? Helping people understand themselves better and develop those tools for success.
Exactly. Okay, so before we move on to this fascinating concept of scatter focus, which I'm really curious to hear more about, let's pause for a moment. What are your initial thoughts on all of this, listeners? What's resonating with you so far about the idea of hyperfocus and managing distractions?
Yeah, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Because even just becoming aware of those distractions, that's a huge first step. And then from there, we can start building those habits and strategies that help us focus on what truly matters.
All right, so now for that plot twist I mentioned. Get ready for it. Scatter focus.
We scatter focus. You mean like letting my mind wander? Isn't that the opposite of everything we've been talking about?
Well, it might seem that way, but Bailey actually makes a really compelling case for daydreaming. He says it's not always a bad thing. In fact, it can be just super important for things like creativity and problem solving.
Okay, I got to admit, that's not what I was expecting. I've always tried to fight off those daydreams, keep my mind on track. But you're saying there's actually value in letting our minds wander.
There is. Think of it like giving your brain some space to breathe, to make those connections that wouldn't happen if it was just hyper-focused all the time.
Okay, my mind is kind of blown right now.
Yeah.
But how do we do that without just completely zoning out and getting nothing done?
That's the key, being intentional about it. And it's actually harder than you might think. Bailey talks about how uncomfortable most of us are with, just sitting with our own thoughts.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. It's like we always have to be doing something, consuming something.
Right. He actually mentions this crazy study in the book where people were given the option to self-administer electric shocks rather than just sit alone with their thoughts for like 15 minutes.
Wait, seriously? They chose to shock themselves instead of just thinking.
I know, it sounds wild, right? But it just shows how much we struggle with unfocused time.
Wow, that's really telling. But it also makes me think, if we can learn to embrace that unfocused time, Maybe there's a lot of untapped potential there.
Exactly. And that's where scatter focus comes in. Bailey actually breaks it down into 3 types: unintentional, purposeful, and habitual.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the difference?
So, unintentional scatter focus, that's just mindlessly drifting off, not really helpful. But purposeful scatter focus, that's when you intentionally let your mind wander to work through a problem or get those creative juices flowing.
Oh, like when you're taking a shower and suddenly the solution to a problem just pops into your head.
Exactly. Or those aha moments you get while taking a walk or doing something mindless. It's like giving your subconscious mind some space to do its thing.
And then there's habitual scatter focus. What's that all about?
That's when you're doing something enjoyable, something low effort, and your mind is kind of free to wander, like listening to music or gardening or maybe taking a bath.
So it's not about being lazy. It's about being strategic with our downtime. Right.
Exactly. And Bailey has all these examples in the book of how scatter focus has led to these breakthroughs in his own life.
Okay, I'm sold on the idea. But how do we actually make it happen? How do we incorporate scatter focus into our already busy lives?
He's got some great tips for that. First of all, schedule it in. Just like you would schedule a meeting or a workout, make time for scatter focus.
Love that. Treat it like it's important, because it is.
Right. And then choose the right activities. Walking, listening to music, spending time in nature. Those are all great for letting your mind wander.
And this is where I think life coaches can really play a key role, right? Helping clients figure out which activities work best for them.
Totally. It's about understanding their individual needs and preferences.
Okay, so we've scheduled it in, we've chosen our activity. Anything else?
One more thing, make sure you capture any ideas that come up. Keep a notebook handy or use a voice memo app.
So true. Those brilliant insights can vanish in an instant if we don't write them down. Okay, listeners, now curious, what activity could you use for habitual scatter focus tomorrow?
Yeah. Share your ideas in the comments. Let's get inspired by each other.
Because ultimately it's about making connections, right?
Exactly. Bailey talks about how our brains are like these networks of dots. Each dot is a piece of information, a memory, an experience. And scatter focus helps us draw lines between those dots, creating new connections and those aha moments of insight and creativity.
So the more dots we collect through learning and experiencing new things, the more potential connections we can make.
Precisely. And he emphasizes the importance of collecting high-quality dots. That means being discerning about the information we consume, choosing sources that are credible, insightful, and relevant to our goals.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to learning. It's not just about cramming information. It's about building this rich network of knowledge that we can draw from.
Absolutely. And it's not just about work or academics. This applies to every area of our lives. The more we expose ourselves to new ideas and experiences, the more creative and resourceful we become.
So scatter focus is actually a key ingredient in personal growth. I love that.
It really is. And that actually brings us to someone who embodies this idea of hyperfocus in a really inspiring way. Coach Rahul Garg. He's a life coach based in India, and he's known as the Hyperfocus coach.
I've heard great things about him. I know he's helped so many people improve their focus and productivity.
He has. He actually runs this amazing monthly group coaching program that focuses on practical techniques for managing distractions and really harnessing that hyperfocus power.
That's fantastic. And for those of you listening who are in India and maybe struggling with focus, Coach Rahul Garg's program could be a game changer. We'll include a link to his website in the episode description, so be sure to check it out.
Definitely. Now, Bailey makes it clear that it's not about choosing between hyperfocus and scatterfocus. It's about finding the right balance, knowing when each mode is most beneficial and being able to switch between them effortlessly.
So it's like they work together, right? Like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. It's about integrating both hyperfocus and scatterfocus into our lives so we can really be at our best.
I love that. So what are some other tips for maximizing both hyperfocus and scatterfocus? What else does Bailey suggest?
While he talks about the importance of investing in our happiness, apparently research shows that happier people are more productive, A&D, more creative.
That makes sense. When you're feeling good, everything just flows better.
Right. He also says to work with our energy levels. Tackle those challenging tasks when you're feeling most alert and save those scatter focus activities for when you're feeling a bit more drained.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And here's another interesting one. Be strategic with your caffeine and alcohol intake. Both can actually affect our mental state.
Okay, so coffee for hyperfocus and maybe a glass of wine to spark those creative juices.
You got it. but of course, always in moderation. And finally, he stresses the importance of our environment. Design your space to support both hyperfocus and scatter focus.
Of a dedicated workspace that's free of distractions for when you need to buckle down and focus, but also spaces that are relaxing and inviting for those scatter focus moments.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment that works for you.
And I think that's a great takeaway for all of us. It's about understanding our own unique needs and creating a personalized approach to focus that really works. So listeners, how can you apply these insights to your work, your studies, your coaching practice starting tomorrow?
Yeah. Could you carve out 30 minutes for a hyper-focus session on a challenging task? Or maybe schedule in a 15-minute walk for some habitual scatter focus?
Let us know your plans in the comments and any other insights you've gleaned from our deep dive today.
Because remember, we're all on this journey together.
So it's like this constant balancing act, right? Finding that sweet spot between being hyper-focused and letting our minds wander.
It really is, and I think that's what makes Bailey's approach so refreshing. It's not about trying to force ourselves into one mode or the other. It's about embracing both and understanding how they work together.
And recognizing that we might need different modes for different tasks,
Right?
right? Like sometimes you need that laser focus to really power through something, and other times you need to give your brain some space to breathe and make connections.
Exactly. And I think Bailey leaves us with a really thought-provoking question at the end of the book. He asks, what if, instead of just reacting to what's urgent or stimulating, we became more deliberate about choosing the experiences we want to have and the memories we want to create?
Wow, that's a powerful question. It's like taking control of our lives,
Right.
not just letting them happen to us.
Absolutely. It's about being intentional with our time and attention, choosing what we want to focus on, and ultimately creating the life we want. And a lot of that comes down to mastering those two modes of attention, hyperfocus and scatter focus.
So it's not just about productivity, it's about well-being, right? Creating a life that's both fulfilling and focused.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are so many resources out there to help you develop those focus skills. Like we talked about earlier, Coach Rahul Garg in India is doing some amazing work with his Hyperfocus group coaching program.
And for our listeners in India, that's definitely something to check out. We'll include a link to his website in the episode description.
Perfect. And remember, there are countless other coaches, books, articles, communities, all dedicated to helping people achieve greater focus and productivity. So do your research, experiment, find what works for you.
It's about building your own personalized toolkit for focus.
Exactly. And remember, mastering your attention, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be days when you feel like you're crushing it, and other days when those distractions just seem to win.
So be kind to yourself, celebrate those victories, and learn from those setbacks. It's about progress, not perfection.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, this is a conversation, not a lecture. We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your struggles, your triumphs, anything that comes up for you in the comments below.
Because we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
Trying to navigate this crazy world and find that focus that allows us to live our best lives.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep that conversation going.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of focus. We hope you found it insightful, empowering, and maybe even a little bit mind-bending.
And remember, the power to focus, it's within you.
Until next time, stay curious and stay focused.